Hey, my friends, good morning. Derek here from Bomb Sucks with another day of Bomb Bites, where we feast upon the words of Christ and we do it one bite at a time. So we left off in a little bit of church history with Joseph Smith in Liberty Jail. And this picture by Liz Lemon Swindle has always been one that is very thought-provoking as you see Joseph there in November of 1838. Well, I want to show you a little bit about the quote-unquote Mormon prisoners that were there. This is an interesting picture. I think it was called Windows of Liberty Jail or something to that effect. But this shows you there were actually 6 men in here. And let me just run through them quickly. So you got Joseph Smith, who at the time was in his early 30s. So he received many revelations during this time period. He continued to provide leadership for the church. You've got Hiram, who was there, the brother of Joseph. As you saw in the video yesterday, he saw his infant son when he was brought to Liberty Jail around February 1st of 1839 by his wife, Mary Fielding Smith. That infant was named Joseph Fielding Smith, or Joseph F. You have got Sidney Rigdon, a witness to the most notable events of the Restoration. He was there for all kinds of stuff. Sidney became very ill at Liberty, but he was such an eloquent speaker that he was able to convince a judge to release him for only after 1 month. So Sidney was there 1 month. You got Lyman White, who was known as the Wild Ram of the Mountains. He was a colonel in the Missouri militia, counselor to Joseph. On the way to Liberty Jail, Lyman was told that if he didn't denounce the prophet, he would be shot at the next morning. To this he replied, "Shoot and be damned." Love that. So you got Alexander McCrae, this guy, tallest man in the jail. He stood 6'6" in his stocking feet. It was said of him that there was not a cowardly hair on his big, red, shaggy head. He later became captain of the Nauvoo Legion and went west with the Saints. He served as a bishop in Salt Lake for 36 years. And you got this gentleman. There's a cool article in Revelations in Context about Caleb Baldwin. He was the oldest man in the group, father of 10, 45 years old. He was a veteran of the War of 1812. He was pulled from his home and severely whipped, leaving scars he would carry for the rest of his life. And his house and his barn were burned to the ground. Caleb struggled physically and emotionally while imprisoned. He went west with the Saints, but died 9 months after his arrival into the valley. So from this point on, I want to turn the time over to, because that's what we do sometimes, to someone with a little bit more credibility than me. So Jeffrey R Holland gave a CES fireside for young adults called Lessons from Liberty Jail. I guess as we're getting ready to study these sections for the next couple days, he gives some great context and he gives a great application. So watch this.
The jail, one of the few and certainly one of the more forbidding such structures in that region, was considered escape-proof, and it probably was. It had 2 stories, the top or main floor accessible to the outside world only by a single, small, heavy door. In the middle of that floor was a trap door through which prisoners were then lowered into the lower floor or dungeon. The outside walls of the prison were of rough-hewn limestone 2 feet thick, and an inside wall of 12-inch oak logs. These 2 walls separated by a 12-inch space filled with loose rock. Combined, these walls made a formidable, virtually impenetrable barrier 4 feet thick. In the dungeon, the floor-to-ceiling height was barely 6 feet, and inasmuch as some of the men, including the prophet Joseph, were over 6 feet tall, this meant that when standing, they were constantly in a stooped position, and when lying, it was mostly upon the rough, bare stones of the prison floor, covered here and there by a bit of loose, dirty straw or an occasional dirty straw mat. The food given to the prisoners was coarse and sometimes contaminated. So filthy, one of them said they could not eat it until driven to it by sheer hunger. On as many as 4 occasions, they had poison administered to them in their food, making them so violently ill that for days they alternated between vomiting and a kind of delirium, not really caring whether they lived or died. In the prophet Joseph's letters, he spoke of the jail being a hell surrounded with demons, where we are compelled to hear nothing but blasphemous oaths and witness a scene of blasphemy, drunkenness, hypocrisy, and debaucheries of every description. We have not blankets to keep us warm, he said, and when we have a fire, we are engulfed in constant smoke. Our souls have been bowed down and our nerves tremble from long confinement. Pen or tongue or angels, Joseph wrote, could not adequately describe the malice of hell that we have suffered here. And all of this during what by some accounts was considered then the coldest winter on record in the state of Missouri. It's not my purpose to make this a speech about the sorrow and difficulty these men confronted in Liberty Jail. So let me put a few photos on the screen. I apologize that not all in this very large crowd will be able to see them, and conclude this little introductory portion of my message. I promise I have something else in mind to say. Here's a photo of the jail pretty much as it stood at the time Joseph and his brethren were incarcerated there. Here's a photo taken some years later when officers and historians from the church visited the location. I'm not sure with that fellow on top whether he's trying to get out or get in. Here is a cross-section of the church's reconstruction of the prison, which can now be seen at our visitor center there. Note the two-story arrangement with a rope and bucket, the only link between the dungeon and the upper floor. Here's a painting by Liz Lemon Swindle showing Joseph in prayer. Note the forlorn, longing look on Joseph's face. And here's a portrayal by Greg Olson showing how Joseph may have written some of the revelations that came during this imprisonment. And this is my final photo, which leads me to the real message I have come to give tonight. Most of us, most of the time, speak of the facility at Liberty as a jail or a prison, and certainly it was that. But Elder Brigham H. Roberts, in recording the history of the church, spoke of the facility as a temple, or more accurately, a prison temple. Elder Neal A. Maxwell used the same phrasing in some of his writings. Certainly it lacked the purity, the beauty, the comfort and cleanliness of this kind of temple, our true temples, our dedicated temples. The speech and behavior of the guards and criminals who came there was anything but temple-like. In fact, the restricting brutality and injustice of this experience at Liberty would make it seem the very antithesis of the liberating, merciful spirit of our temples and the ordinances that are performed in them. So in what sense could Liberty Jail be called a temple? Or at least a kind of temple in the development of Joseph Smith personally and in his role as a prophet? And what does such a title tell us about God's love and teachings, including where and when that love and those teachings are made manifest? As we think on these things, does it strike us that spiritual experience, revelatory experience, sacred experience can come to every one of us in all the many and varied stages and circumstances of our lives if we want it? If we hold on and pray on, if we keep our faith strong through our difficulties. We love and cherish our dedicated temples and the essential exalting ordinances that are performed there. We thank heaven and the presiding brethren that more and more of them are being built, giving more and more of us greater access to them. They're truly the holiest, most sacred structures in the kingdom of God, to which we all ought to go as worthily and as often as possible. But tonight's message is that when you have to, you can have sacred, revelatory, profoundly instructive experience with the Lord in any situation you are in. Indeed, let me say that even a little stronger. You can have sacred, revelatory, profoundly instructive experience with the Lord in the most miserable experiences of your life, in the worst settings, while enduring the most painful injustices, when facing the most insurmountable odds and opposition you have ever faced.
So let me reiterate one thing that he just said. You can have sacred, revelatory, and profoundly instructive experiences with the Lord in the most miserable experiences of your life, in the worst settings, while enduring the most painful injustices, while facing the most insurmountable odds and opposition you have ever faced. In one way or another, great or small, dramatic or incidental, every one of us is going to spend a little time in Liberty Jail, spiritually speaking. So with that in mind, tomorrow's episode, we're going to get into the things that are taught there and how you and I can learn from them. Hey, thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. And thank you for sharing. Go check out our amazing gospel-themed socks at bombsocks.com. See you guys tomorrow. Godspeed. Bye-bye.